Welcome to Out of the Blue number 467, part 3 out of 4. I'm going to read from this book today. And in this book, she describes a heavenly world. And I'm going to ask the question of where in the universe he describes would her world fit? I'm reading the author's preface. And her name is Rebecca Ruter Springer. This is an American author from the late 1800s, I believe. And she had a deathbed vision that lasted a long time. So the book begins on the next page, but on the preface page it says, Rebecca says, quote, "The pages of this little volume contain no fancy sketch written to while away an idle hour, but are the true, though greatly condensed, record of an experience during days when life hung in the balance between time and eternity, with the scales dipping decidedly towards the eternity side. I am painfully aware of the fact that I can never paint for others the scenes as they appeared to me during those wonderful days. If I can only dimly show the close linking of the two lives, the mortal and the divine, as they then appeared to me, I may be able to partly tear the veil from the death we so dread, and show it to be only an open door into a new and beautiful phase of the life we now live. If any of the scenes depicted should seem irreverent in view of our religious training here, I can only say I give it as it came to me. In those strange happy hours, the close blending of the two lives, so wrapped about with the Father's watchful care and tender love, the reunion of friends with the dear earth ties unchanged, the satisfied desires, the glad surprises, and the divine joys, all intensified and illuminated by the reverence and love and adoration that all hearts gave to the blessed Trinity, appeared to me the most perfect revelation of that, quote, blessed life, of which we here so fondly dream, with the hope that it may comfort and uplift some who read, even as it then did, and its memory will ever do for me. I submit this imperfect sketch of a most perfect vision." So yeah, Trinity. She talks about the Trinity in here. So her vision is Protestant. She has a real Protestant afterlife experience, and I'm just going to point out. Well, maybe I should have found it first, but J. Hewitt Mackenzie talks specifically about the upper astral realm, where all religions have their headquarters, and where people of specific religions have experiences that are fit right in within their religious belief, and that after a time there, you graduate out of that into what he calls the first heaven. So I guess that's it for now. I wanted to introduce her. I'm going to read some more from her tomorrow, because she has a really beautiful vision. Let me just start. I'll get a little started. Chapter 1. She says, "I was many hundred miles away from home and friends, and had been very ill for many weeks. I was entirely among strangers, and my only attendant, though of a kindly disposition, knew nothing whatever of the duties of the sick room. Hence I had none of the many delicate attentions that keep up an invalid's failing strength. I had taken no nourishment of any kind for nearly 3 weeks, scarcely even water, and was greatly reduced in both flesh and strength, and consciousness seemed at times to wholly desert me. I had an unutterable longing for the presence of my dear distant ones, for the gentle touch of beloved hands, and whispered words of love and courage, but they never came. They could not. Responsible duties that I felt must not be neglected kept these dear ones much of the time in distant scenes, and I would not recall them. I lay in a large, comfortable room on the second floor of a house in Kentville. The bed stood in a recess at one end of the apartment, and from this recess a large stained-glass window opened upon a veranda fronting on the street. During much of my illness, I lay with my face to this window and my back to the room, and I remember thinking how easy it would be to pass through the window to the veranda, if one so desired. When the longing for the loved, distant faces and voices became more than I could bear, I prayed that the dear Christ would help me to realize his blessed presence, and that since the beloved ones of earth could not minister to me, I might feel the influence of the other dear ones who are all, quote, ministering spirits. Especially did I ask to be sustained should I indeed be called to pass through the dark waters alone. It was no idle prayer, and the response came swiftly, speedily. All anxieties and cares slipped away from me as a worn-out garment, and peace, Christ's peace, enfolded me. I was willing to wait God's time for the coming of those so dear to me, and said to myself more than once, if not here, it will be there. There is no fear of disappointment. In those wonderful days of agonized suffering and great peace, I felt that I had truly found, as never before, the refuge of, quote, the everlasting arms. They lifted me, they upbore me, they enfolded me, and I rested in them as a tired child upon its mother's bosom. One morning, dark and cold and stormy, after a day and night of intense suffering, I seemed to be standing on the floor by the bed, in front of the stained-glass window. Someone was standing by me, and when I looked up, I saw it was my husband's favorite brother, who had, quote, crossed the flood many years ago. My dear brother Frank, I cried out joyously, how good of you to come. He responds, it was a great joy to me that I could do so, little sister. Shall we go now? And he drew me towards the window. I turned my head and looked back into the room that somehow I felt I was about to leave forever. It was in its usual good order, a cheery, pretty room. The attendant sat by the stove at the farther end, comfortably reading a newspaper, and on the bed, turned toward the window, lay a white, still form, with the shadow of a smile on the poor, worn face. My brother drew me gently, and I yielded, passing with him through the window, out on the veranda, and from thence, in some unaccountable way, down to the street. There I paused and said earnestly, I cannot leave Will and our dear boy. I cannot leave Will and our dear boy. They are not here, dear, but hundreds of miles away, he answered. Yes, I know, but they will be here. Oh, Frank, they will need me. Let me stay, I pleaded. Would it not be better, he says, if I brought you back a little later, after they come? Would you surely do so, I asked. Most certainly, if you desire it. You are worn out with the long suffering, and a little rest will give you new strength. I felt that he was right, and so in a few words, I felt that he was right, said so in a few words, and we started slowly up the street. He had drawn my hand within his arm and endeavored to interest me as we walked. But my heart clung to the dear ones whom I felt I was not to see again on earth, and several times I stopped and looked wistfully back the way we had come.